As this year's 16 Days campaign continues, we look at the role that faith-based organizations can play in the fight against gender-based violence. Let's now speak to Daniela Gennrich. She is the coordinator of Speak Out South Africa, which is a secretariat to the South African Interfaith Action to End GBV Collective. And this, of course, is our big question tonight. So you can also give us your thoughts on how you believe that faith-based organizations, what role can they play towards ending this scourge of gender-based violence. Let me thank you so much, Daniela, for your time this evening. You've done work on this particular subject, and let's start by talking just what you found on the ground. How bad are things?
In terms of gender-based violence in general, or in terms of the faith sector?
The faith sector.
Okay, well, I think what's important around the faith sector is that while there is a problem with the abuse of power in a number of cases, there is also a growing movement within the faith sector of people and faith leaders that are working towards becoming part of the solution. And we've just recently had a summit, and we've put together a joint statement of confession and commitment around that to be able to become much more actively involved and work much more closely together.
And I'm going to come to that statement of confession in just a moment, but let's stay with the ones that, you know, are now becoming part of the movement, because that is critical, because that voice is really needed. And I wonder for them, what are some of the things that they are doing in order to make sure that their voices are amplified?
So I think what's really important, and in our conversations over the last 2 years, has been that we need to examine ourselves as a sector, and we need to see in which ways some of our teachings and some of our practices have created environments where gender-based violence can be condoned and can be justified in particular ways. And from that, also to what we've discovered when we've gone back into our sacred texts and into our traditions, we also have a number of tools that are very positive and that we have been learning from one another. We've been working among 8 different faith groups to really learn from one another, build joint, deeper understanding of our shared values and principles, and to begin to call one another to account as well in terms of where things have gone wrong, and to talk about what accountability might mean for us. So it's been quite important that each faith tradition, there have been scholars and activists and leaders who have gone back to really speak to people and try and learn and find out what we can do better and where we have gone wrong. We Will Speak Out South Africa itself was actually originated through research that was done amongst survivors several years ago, who said that actually when they've been violated, the first place they've needed to go has been their faith community. And unfortunately, often that has been the last place where they got what they needed. And the reason why they have felt that need is, as the leader of the Pepisa Survivors Network that we work with closely has said, Nompilo Kwenza, she said, when you are abused, your spirit is attacked. And that's why we need to go to our faith leaders. So there's a specific role that the faith sector could potentially play, but unfortunately through ignorance and misuse of scriptures, misunderstandings of the dynamics between men and women and our relationships and our responsibility, where we have not, in fact, been there for the survivors as we should have been.
And really, as you say, the safe spaces are quite critical, and really these are organizations that also should be providing that particular umbrella. But Daniela, let's talk about then the statement of confession. Give us a bit more on it. Yes. and how then do you also ensure that they live according to what they're confessing?
So the statement came out of a process of several months of really learning from each other, but also exploring and interviewing various leaders and scholars and so on, and trying to understand how gender-based violence plays out in our different contexts. And what was much easier to do was to go back to our sacred texts and some of the positives that have taken place and draw on those. But what was much more difficult to do, and we had some very hard conversations around acknowledging our shortcomings. And out of that process and looking at the gap between our ideals and our shortcomings, we've developed a set of commitments, commitments to action, very concrete commitments, and also commitments to accountability and commitments to establishing accountability systems amongst ourselves as well. And we're part of a national collective that we're Secretariat to, called the Faith Action to End Gender-Based Violence. And together, we meet monthly, we learn together, we share together and learn from one another, but we also address some of the issues that come up and try, for example, through public statements or through addressing when we have heard about abuses, addressing some of those issues in that particular context and offering support for those faith communities to much more effectively than they have in the past deal with the problem. So we're trying to draw alongside, trying to build solidarity within ourselves as a progressive movement within the faith sector, while at the same time also strengthening our advocacy voice, because we are not speaking with one voice within the faith sector, not even within a single faith community itself.
And really that for me, just very briefly, our time in fact is gone, but I just wonder what becomes the impact then of not speaking in one voice, because that was going to be my next question.
I think that the challenge is that we then start the blame game and we don't have to take responsibility. And it's really, really critical also that when we recognize that the faith sector has lost credibility over the years. And that's why it's so important that we do work together and we do build accountability mechanisms, and that we are engaged at all levels in multi-stakeholder efforts to respond to the National Strategic Plan and to be part of the solution. And I mean, we're learning as we're going along. And yes, there is pushback at points, but there's also a growing sense of a real desire to learn and to become much better advocates and much better at responding in ways that do not promote secondary abuse. Also recognizing that within our own faith communities, in the same way as 3 out of 5 people in the broader community are survivors, we also have perpetrators in our midst. So we cannot say with 85% of the population ascribing to a religion that it's got nothing to do with us. It's got everything to do with us. And there's a growing movement that is really trying to move forward to address the issues. But yes, and we would call on a broader society and on the media, call us to account when we go wrong, because that's also the only way we can learn.
And I tell you, as someone who is in the faith community myself, really these have been some of the, the big conversations that one really wish that we have, because we start to, need to start calling out, some of the behavior that we see, but also look towards these solutions. Let me thank you so much for your time, Daniela. And as you say that things are looking up, it does look like there's more and more people coming forward to try and be part of this. But let me thank you. This does go a long way. That was Daniela Gennrich, who she's the coordinator of Speak Out South Africa, which is the Secretariat to the South African Interfaith Action to End GBV Collective.